Greetings. This paper is entitled The American Dream, an Indian Version in the Age of Globalization. The paper is an integral part of a longitudinal study of Indians who initially arrived in the United States in the pursuit of a dream for the specific purpose of fulfilling academic and or professional goals, and who eventually elasticized their stay as they became permanent residents or naturalized citizens. While literary works abound with poignant tales of the trauma of adjustment, or the relatively smooth transition into the middle-class mosaic, or even the fierce retention of ethnic distinctiveness, there are limited historical and sociological analyses of the Indian immigrant experience, fewer still of the professional Indian woman's immigrant experience, and none about the structural, cultural, public-private dichotomy of the potential immigrant who has not quite burned her or his bridges. The paper briefly alludes to the multiple case studies of post-1965 groups of students and professionals through the 70s, 80s, and 90s who had no definitive plan of adopting the United States as their country of residence, but who eventually did. Their structural assimilation and cultural distinctiveness is juxtaposed against the post-millennium generation of diaspora Indians. This group, the focus of the current paper, is a product of globalization. This new era of globalization, with its concomitant evils of corporate knowledge shoppers, the prolific H-1B visa holders, cradle-snatching academic recruiters, digital natives, and netizens, and the prodigal returnee, albeit temporary, is the context in which the newest potential immigrant to the United States displays different strategies of adaptation. During both these processes of transformation across the millennium divide, the American dream has undergone a redefinition twice, once during the transition from the pre-immigrant to the immigrant stage, and a second time, a decade into the 21st century, in the very visualization of home. Given the proximity, virtual and otherwise, of India, and the possibility of the dream's concretization literally and figuratively in the Aereo-championed, gadget-abounding, picket fence-less modern-day castle in a new milieu, an economically vibrant urban India, one wonders if the dream indeed has turned full circle. Would that explain why the latest Indian arrival feels a minimal urge to adapt to its host society and even less to its newest successful racialized minority? Would it also explain why, during this volte-face from their pre-millennium cohort's collectivist behavior, what has remained consistent is the triple marginalization of the single professional woman? My fond hope is that I will be able to cover all these issues in 15 minutes. First, a quick comment on the resources. The statistical data is collected from the U.S. Census Bureau, Department of Homeland Security, and American Community Survey records. The behavioral and attitudinal components of the profile are based on data gathered through participant observation, survey responses, and in-depth interviews. The pre-millennium group, 256 respondents, 181 men, 75 women, ages 24 to 45. Post-millennium group, 151 respondents, 92 men and 59 women, ages 19 to 40. All hold F1 student, J1 exchange, and H1 or H1B training visas. Therefore, in the strictest sense, they could neither be categorized as immigrants nor compartmentalized as ethnics until they formalize their elongated temporary status to a permanent resident status in the United States. How that process came about, at what emotional cost between the 1970s and 90s, has become the subject of a separate evaluative paper I'm presenting elsewhere this summer. One of the conclusions there is that the men, married or single, slid out of their postdocs and into their sponsored jobs, professional careers, and a perceived middle-class lifetime without going through a process of complete acculturation, and supported a public assimilationist front while in the privacy of their homes they remained ethnically whole. However, the enigmatic single professional woman, now out of the safe cocoon of a campus identity, whose marital marketability had declined, unlike that of her male counterpart, did not slip into suburbia so smoothly. In fact, these women were doubly marginalized because they did not conform to the expectations of their own ethnic group. The women I interviewed made more of a conscious effort, therefore, to transcend their ethnic-specific identity and blend with other ethnic women in comparable situations and with the more liberal segment of the mainstream. Others, realizing that they could go home, did. This, then, was a watershed between the pre-millennium and the post-millennium group, now 60% of the Asian Indian population. Who made up the numbers? Mostly knowledge workers, ICT or IT personnel, and STEM scholars, science, technology, engineering, and medicine scholars and students. Where did they congregate? In California, which had the largest number of Indian immigrants, 18.7% of the Indian-born population, and is especially visible in metropolitan areas like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Jose. This brings us to the infamous Silicon Valley, where the Asian Indian science and engineering S&E population grew to 146% in the last 10 years. Aside from making strides in scholarship, Indians carved out a niche for themselves as entrepreneurs, particularly in the high-tech, high-impact companies, edging the Chinese out only marginally, 25.8% to 24.4%. This created what Pangaria has described in the Economic Times as an Indophobia. What does this mean for the man on the street? Well, for the two that I have met on the streets of San Jose, who I will call Arun and Ravi, it was both overt and subtle. Arun says, every morning as I drive into work and show my ID at the kiosk, the guy looks at me like there's serious injustice in the world, like I should be in that kiosk and he should be behind the wheels of my Prius. They look at me like I'm a thief. Says Ravi, I feel the same way when I walk into a Fry's store or even a McDonald's, and I'm not even from here. I'm not even an engineer. Actually, he was studying hotel management at Cornell and visiting his brother. U.S. academics like Harvard professor Richard Freeman, journalists like Thomas Friedman, and entrepreneurs like Intel CEO Craig Barrett continually nurture the fear that Indians and the Chinese are coming in large hordes to take away American jobs. Indians and Americans should take a deep yogic breath, however, because as per the last 2001 census in India, there were 26 million urban workers and 3.6 million with technical degrees, and certainly not all of them are here in the United States. Indians in the United States are prolific inventors and co-inventors, accounting for 21% of all of the immigrant patent applications between 1998 and 2006. They were also contributing to defense-related research, both classified and unclassified, advanced ceramics, nanotechnology, munitions, and missile technology. An unmixed blessing? Not quite. Not for two of the rare breed of non-citizen Indian scholars involved in classified defense-related research who confessed to a general feeling of unease, both in their personal life and in their work, never quite knowing how many pieces of the jigsaw puzzle were deliberately withheld from them. This general sense of unease is also all-pervasive in a very different arena in India regarding the proverbial brain drain. In an extensive study sponsored by the ILO, Vinod Kadria demonstrated the magnitude of the emigration of talent from India, providing a rare insight into the institution-specific immigration from IIT Bombay, Madras and Delhi, and All India Institute of Medicine in Delhi. Kadria also looks at incentives provided by foreign institutions recently, and how the educational branches of the government of UK, France, Germany and New Zealand, the latter even offering citizenship on graduation, have started a virtual education fair warfare. Although the primary attraction for the global US market is the graduate student, the undergraduate and even the high school students are now sought after. The latter are products of expensive private boarding schools in Uti and Kodaikanal in South India or in Eastern India private schools. They're also increasingly younger. Barely 15, but savvy global citizens, hungry for all things Western, they're a part of this new craze, going away abroad at 16. For them, the sky, preferably the American one, is the limit. Kadria argues, however, that the impact of the brain drain should be seen in a positive light, in the context of the globalization of human capital and the consequent expatriate investment in health and education. The Indian government has heeded such advice and recognized the contributions of the NRI, the non-resident Indian, making it possible for India now to be the largest remittance-receiving nation in the world, with figures somewhere between 23 and 32 billion. Devesh Kapoor talks about a more important remittance, the augmented human capital through return migration, which has a direct impact on the exchange of ideas on technology, worldview, and economic policy making. Case in point, Silicon Valley's paradigmatic success, which has lent credibility to Indian software programs so that it now has a brand name. A 2009 projection estimates that there will be 100,000 returnees in the next 3 to 5 years. These are the statistics, the policy analyses, the future projections, and the conjectures. But who quantifies the fears, the pressures, the newfound freedom, at 16 no less, the apathy, the longing to belong? A daunting task at best, but the problems are more compounded since there is no culture of seeking counseling amongst Indians. The post-millennium interviews reveal that there were comparable periods of adjustment to a new setting, but not necessarily a comparable path to adaptation, particularly via the established ethnic community. The structural cultural dichotomy was minimal because a home in both a physical sense and a virtual sense was much closer than it had been to their earlier counterparts, even if its bourgeois excesses were not. Oh, to be driven home by the family chauffeur, especially if you've been debugging a program for 18 hours, said one software developer from San Francisco recently. Seriously, the quality of life here is so poor. Said another, go back home? Sure, why not? They have everything back home now. A second biotech expert said, would I go home tomorrow in a heartbeat if I was alone? I have my PhD, I have my postdoc, I've published. I really have accomplished all I set out to do. Why haven't I gone back? Well, my wife came here on an H-4 visa. She put her career on hold for all these years, and now it's her turn. A third respondent said, if they don't give me a green card, no big deal. There's lots of opportunities in so many different places. My women respondents were reticent about returning, except those who were married and who had invested in real estate. Those who were single, professional, and career-oriented said they would go back, frequent trips, but not be back for good. Why? Constraints of attire, of etiquette, of male hegemony. Asked if they face them here, especially the last, and particularly in the corporate world, one of them said yes, but at least I know how to fight it here. Any discrimination other than those based on gender? All of them said yes, especially after 9/11. One said they look at me like I shouldn't be here. I guess they think I'm Middle Eastern. Another said discrimination? Of course. I'm a woman from India. I'm educated. I don't speak good English. I speak it well. I defy all stereotypes. What's to like? A third respondent said, I do all the work, but I'm never the principal investigator. She worked in aerospace. Have you ever filed a lawsuit? The uniform response was, of course not. There's a cultural impediment to hashing things out in the law courts, even when there's overt discrimination. One of my women respondents remarked, from them, I expect it. It is when your own people discriminate against you, isolate you, that it hurts. For a lot of the women, not being a part of the regular weekend socializing reserved for their married counterparts was disturbing. This was their only chance to relive and revive their ethnic and sub-ethnic identity, even to wear a sari. For the younger women, it was a different sense of isolation. I met 5 of them recently, 20 to 22, all intense about their careers, 3 from the Bay Area, Psych, Cog-Sci, and Poli-Sci majors, a refreshing change from our usual pool of STEM gentlemen, and 2 from Los Angeles, 1 from San Diego, 1 in biology and the other 2 in computer science. All of them missed home, even though they called regularly, but they felt no urge to use the community here as a substitute. 2 of them from Los Angeles, 1 had lived in a dorm. Well, actually, both had lived in the first year in the dorm, and the second continued. Let's call them Nilu and Lata. Both of them had painful stories of roommates hating them, making them almost quit and go home. Did they talk to anyone? Nilu said, you mean like a counselor? No, I don't like talking to strangers about personal matters. Lata said, what's the point? They wouldn't understand. A recent 2010 study shows that there are very few schools that have counselors trained to advise Asian American students, even if they did rise above their cultural barriers and opened up. My other young female and male respondents were generally quite cavalier, enjoying their carefree undergraduate days, adjusting rapidly and easily to an American campus life. However, 55% of them said they would go back when their visa expired. What will they do back in India? Work with an NGO, travel. These are the 2 most common responses. One young entrepreneurial type said he would be a call center recruiter and teach Indians how to speak American. Another man had an unusual response. I don't believe in visas, he said. One day they'll be obsolete. You'll see. That's my dream. Then you can go wherever you want to. You already do in your mind and on the internet. I thought about what he said. He was my youngest respondent, 19, wise beyond his years, politically savvy, socially conscious, a digital native, a cyber citizen, an e-agent of change, with his own website. To him, the Italian IBM organized strike online, the rallying behind the Arab Spring, the Iran Twitter, the Indian governance, flash mobs and globalization and urbanization, even the more gimmicky rewriting of the epic Mahabharata on Facebook, that was routine. He told me he was involved in the 2009 Voter India report and Jaggore campaign, cyber campaign, which led to the highest young voter turnout since independence. He was then 17. I was impressed. Then he told me he was involved in the Dina Mehta-led mobilization of resources online to assist the tsunami victims of South and Southeast Asia. He was then 13. I knew then that with this kind of human capital, India's future in a global world was secure. The dream had indeed turned full circle. Thank you. Shradha Chaudhary.